Welcome to the podcast. My name is David. Let's save the world. And for this episode, we could have covered so many things, but we've decided to tackle social anxiety. In just a few moments, I'll be speaking with Gervargizian, the writer and director of an amazing new film called The Stylist. And a little bit later, we'll be speaking with Dr. Christine Purdon. She is a professor of psychology at the University of Waterloo in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. She is the director of clinical training in the PhD program at the University of Waterloo, and she's the co-author of Overcoming Obsessive Thoughts. But first, there's been a lot of changes here at This Podcast Will Save the World, so I want to give you a little bit of an update on what we're doing. This podcast is now part of a larger effort that we're undertaking called Geek Wellness Education. We are a recognized 501c3 nonprofit that brings mental health and social community education and resources to the geek community. So if you'd like more information on what we're doing or to make a tax-deductible donation, visit gwecontact.org. And you can reach us by email at our new address. That's info@gwecontact.org, or of course on social media at gwecontact on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. As I mentioned before, we have the Horror Heals, a tribute to Child's Play's John LaFia, panels that are going to be at least 6 horror conventions in 2021. And we just announced a new initiative that we're starting off with in our hometown of Richmond, Virginia, and hopefully we'll be expanding from there, called Heroes Assemble. That is our new plan to partner with cosplayers as superheroes and princesses and sci-fi heroes to visit and uplift the spirits of seriously ill children. So as I mentioned, you can go to our website at gwecontact.org for all of that info. But listen, I'm really excited about The Stylist. It comes out on March 1st, so in just a few days. And it's about a lonely hairstylist who becomes obsessed with the lives of her clients and descends into murderous madness. I've seen it, it's fantastic, and it touches on a lot of issues that we cover here and a lot of issues that I've dealt with myself. So please welcome to the show the co-writer and director of The Stylist, Gervargizian.
Well, thank you.
Again, I love the movie. I cannot wait to buy it and watch it again. So let's get into this. You have been a hairdresser for several years. What is it? My sister's a hairdresser. Some of her, obviously, a lot of her best friends are hairdressers. What is it about this profession and the kind of, it's kind of a weird intimacy between strangers, one of which has their hands in your hair, between the hairdresser and the client, that you thought would make a good setup for not only the short, which is amazing that people can see right now, but also the feature length.
Yeah, like you said, I've been a hairstylist for now, oh my God, I don't know, 18 years. I'm not sure anymore. I don't know how that much time's passed, but it's a really unique relationship because there's this layer of kind of, you don't know, there's this, it's almost like a confession or a therapist where you feel safe. I feel like talking about even more than you may say to one of your best friends. And I read about one theory for that, and I thought it was interesting, and it kind of boiled it down to the idea that, or the fact that it is a physical thing, like you said, your hands are in their hair, you're washing their hair. It is intimate physically and emotionally, and it's something about the physical touch and it being something that is open and in public. They say that's something like that affects us psychologically, makes us feel closer. And they compared it to the difference of like stuff that's done behind closed doors, like a massage therapist or I mean, doctors, obviously we don't feel comfortable like that, but it just had something about the physical part of the job and it being open, and it was just really interesting. I never thought about it that way. But I did think like this is a really unique world to explore in film, and it's something that like I kind of just, it's like the indie horror thought process. It's like, what do I know? What do I have access to that's unique to me? And so I thought, this is like a story I could write and really understand it. And my hope was that a hairstylist could watch it and be like, yeah, that is how that is. That was one of my biggest goals with the whole thing.
Yeah. And hopefully no one is out there doing what she does in this film. Because
No, I get so many silly questions, which I understand about, did some client that you were upset at inspire this whole thing, and it's really not that way. I know that's funny, but it's just,
well, I think one of the great things about horror is, and because I've heard a lot of things about, oh, well, horror movies shouldn't deal with mental illnesses. Look, it's not saying that every person with a mental illness is going to be a killer, just like it's saying that not every hairdresser is going to be an awful person. It's just saying this particular one is dealing with some issues and takes them out in a pretty bad and pretty painful way, I'd imagine. Thanks for drugging the people in advance. Uh, so I saw somewhere that that Leatherface was an inspiration, which I can definitely see that, wearing skin in a different sort of way. And also Dr. Giggles, which is awesome. No one ever talks about that film. But this isn't a typical slasher film. We are with the killer the entire film. And not only do we kind of see the world through her eyes, we sympathize with her. I know there's a couple, like I think I mentioned to you before, there's a couple oof moments in there where I'm like, oh man, I've been there. That sucks for her.
yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you wanted to do your take on slashers, and some of the inspiration that went into making kind of a grounded, emotional, psychological slasher.
Yeah, when you bring up Dr. Giggles, which is hilarious and great, it's that kind of time period of slashers is just something that came to mind when the idea first came to me. Like, you'd think there already would have been a kind of funny hairstylist killer slasher movie in that early 90s period when there were lots of profession driven slashers. But then with my take on it, I really didn't want to do the traditional slasher setup, which is, more the victim's point of view and just like a fun, not super developed killer in your traditional slasher. With this, we kind of followed. I was try to turn to. There's not very many films that are from the perspective of the killer. Like Maniac is one, and I think as disgusting as Maniac is, you also feel sad for him. And May was another film I really turned to, which she's not really a slasher, but it's a very similar kind of you watching a character break down completely and like self-destruct and self-sabotage. I've always been interested in anti-hero type stories and just films about people that are confrontational and that make you really think. It's just not black and white. Someone isn't just the one bad thing they did and they're not the only good thing they did. It's a much more confusing, layered thing than that. And I just have always loved films that make you walk away and you're thinking about it for a long time. So that was our hope with this character. And we're not really trying to justify what she does, but we're just trying to explain there's always a reason. There's a million reasons for what led people to a certain place. It doesn't justify it, but there is a reason. And I think a lot of times it's ignored and people are just called monsters. And I have some super dark sympathy for the stories behind, what makes someone get to that point.
As do I. I mean, I don't know what that point is where you go, where it's someone like me who deals with depression and anxiety and all that, to where we go, I'm sick of destroying myself. Let me go get help. And what teeters someone over the edge of to where they're scalping strangers. I'm not sure what
Yeah.
that is, but that is a tragic thing, even though we're not justifying what someone will do after the fact.
Yeah. And with her routine, and I kind of battled with this with the writing because I wanted her to feel really grounded, but I also had to accept myself that what she's doing is very over the top. It's not very, if you compare it to any real serial killer, it's not very to do something so dramatic. So I really battled with this, like, this line I was trying to hold of, like, what she does is very theatrical and over the top and not believable, but I want her still to feel, at least
Oh,
emotionally,
sure.
believable.
And I definitely think that
Um,
watching the film, you don't get taken out of the film when she does that kind of thing, because the rest of the film you're so grounded with her that it feels like a natural thing for her. Bravo for that, because like you said, it is kind of an out there thing that she's doing.
yes.
So, when this interview gets published, it will be Women in Horror Month. Now, obviously, there are male hairdressers and all of that, but a lot of the aspects of this film, the focus on a wedding and the bridesmaids' relationships with each other, that's kind of sprinkled in throughout. I don't feel like this would be the same movie if a guy had come up with it. Maybe that's me being a little bit prejudiced, but honestly, a lot of my favorite horror movies are coming from women these days. I think that it's maybe not a coincidence that so many unique voices are coming from female directors. And previously, maybe we didn't get those. Maybe females didn't get those opportunities.
Yeah.
Where do you see horror? I guess not only historically, but is it finally changing now that we have your Revenge and Babadook and all of these amazing films that are coming out? Is the landscape changing?
I think it really is, and I think it even expands beyond horror. I've noticed in film in general that finally it's becoming a focus to get more people behind and different types of people behind the camera. I think naturally, like what you're saying with these different perspectives, is we've just, for so long, it's been so common that almost every film was made by the same type of person. A white male was the majority. So that's why we were getting so much of the same type of story about the same type of character. It's just like, it's natural that if you have different people telling stories, you'll get different types of stories. Like Stylist being so female heavy, and the female centric term has become kind of annoying to me because so many people use it, I feel like, just to promote stuff anymore. But
Yeah.
it just happened naturally. Like, as a hairstylist, I've spent so much of my life surrounded by so many women. Not that men don't also do hair, but with the character, I just kind of saw her as not really entering her mind much. Sexually, she's super repressed. I never even thought of her as a sexual character. It took me a long time to figure out what that meant, but so it just kind of naturally developed that all these characters were women. And when we actually kind of got closer to making the film and I was breaking down the cast list, is when I really realized, I was like, oh my God, we only have like one male role and it's not very big. It seemed intentional, but I really didn't do that. It kind of just came out that way. And I think that's why when we see all these films finally made by women, like Babadook, Revenge, or Raw, like, it's natural that the protagonist is now a female. And not that horror hasn't had that for a long time, but to be fair, the characters haven't been as developed. And yeah, we're finally getting more than just one type of person telling stories. And so that's super exciting. And it's natural, I think, to tell a story close to what you are or how you feel. So sorry, that rant went on.
No. I think that there was a time when the role of women at least on screen in horror, was to be the bimbo who took her top off before a machete went through her chest.
Yeah.
And and then they said, oh, well, we're going to empower women by making one of those women a final girl. But it still never felt like it was coming from, well, an honest place, because a lot of these people were guys and it was shot through a male gaze. And, meanwhile, you have movies now like Raw and The Invitation and Mothers of Monsters, which I covered a few episodes ago, that are so obviously different, that aren't from the male gaze. And I think it's amazing. And speaking of amazingly talented women, Najara Townsend, you could film her reading the phone book and I'd watch.
She's so talented, it's unreal. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm on the same page. She could read the
Yeah.
phone book. It'd probably be amazing.
Yeah, she was in Contracted a few years back and was just amazing in that. And I was like, man, she's got to do more in the horror realm, because I'm not really much for dramas and stuff. But yeah, I was looking forward to this movie, and man, she's great. Tell me about her.
Yeah, through Contracted is actually how I was introduced to her as an actor, and I got to meet her actually at a premiere of that film. Trying to think, was that 2014 maybe? And yeah, I was so impressed with her performance, because the whole film is really her, like almost by herself in every scene, completely falling apart. It's like an incredible audition to show that she can do everything. And I had the opportunity to get the short film script to her, and she liked it, and we were just like on and go. We just started going, and I was so intimidated. I still am by her talent, because she's so good. But I don't know how we could have how this film. It's like I said with the character, it's such a balance that I needed, and I wanted her to feel so relatable, but she's also insane, and Najara can just say so much with like barely moving her eyes a certain direction. And there's many scenes in Stylist where she's alone and there's no dialogue, and she just blows us away in every scene. And it's something about the fact that she can just portray so much with a look. Like, even we have this big dance club scene, which is kind of her worst nightmare scenario. And when they are like, we should go dance, and her reaction to it like kills me, because it's so perfect. It's just this sudden expression in her face that's small, but it's perfect. And I really think we owe Najara so much to how the film works, because it could have come off campy or silly, and we really wanted her to feel relatable and real while being this crazy over the top serial killer.
And one thing because one of the issues with my anxiety is, especially, because I've gotten plenty of help, but with my dependency issues and anxiety, whenever I was talking to someone that I respected or whatever, I found it like impossible to look them in the eyes. But at the same time, I was like trying to get a gauge of them. But if they looked up, I'm looking away. And I noticed that she's kind of doing a lot of that in the film. I don't know how much research she did in it, but the timing of it was great, of where she's clearly trying to go, how is this person being so natural? And then there's several times throughout the film where when the person looks over to speak to her or whatever, she kind of looks away in a very natural way that I kind of identified with. And so just little details like that, I thought, again, hit me where it hurt. So thanks for that.
She really portrayed anxiety in such a way. What's weird is I don't feel like we talked a lot about anxiety specifically, which is something I really battle with, which maybe it was just obvious to Najara that that's what this was about. She so much displays those little uncomfortable moments and just got it. And I've been really happy to see, and it's opened my eyes to stuff that I didn't know I was putting into the movie. People really getting that from the film. They're like, oh, identify so much with the anxiety she's going through. I was like, wow, I put all my anxiety issues into this movie without realizing that was one of the main focuses.
Yes, whether we know it or not, we're putting our anxiety out into the world. So yeah, she's amazing. So, and I know that maybe some of this wasn't intentional, but there are scenes where, like I said, I felt bad for the lady. She's obviously trying to figure out how to connect with people, how to have friends, how do I do what you do when everyone else is just doing their thing? And like I said, it really hit me and really connected as authentic. Was there I guess there was a tightrope you had to walk through to kind of, let's make this natural. Or like you said, was it all her just instinct?
It was, we really wanted to like take the film completely into Claire's perspective, like put the viewer so much into her perspective that you almost start to see things in a distorted way, like Claire. Like there are moments where I feel like we identify with her. We don't like characters that she doesn't like. When really, if you step back and think about it, you're like, well, there's no real reason not to like this character, but I've just become so much on Claire's side that I'm like completely disillusioned with, like, I think how she thinks now.
Yep.
And like, there's this kind of climactic scene with, her and Bria's character, Olivia, where they have this conversation on a parking deck roof. And it's just a conversation, but it's like heartbreaking from Claire's side. It's like the end of the world for Claire. But for Olivia, she's just laying out simple boundaries. Like, I need space. And it's a normal thing to say. It's not like, I hate you, go die now. But that's what Claire's hearing.
Yep.
It feels that way when you watch it. It feels how Claire feels. And it's not totally honest to what's actually happening, which is what we wanted people to come totally onto Claire's side. And maybe question like, well, she's not really saying anything that's not totally understandable right now. Same with her husband. Claire develops this kind of total dislike of him for no real reason. But we feel the same way. And my editor actually pointed that out. He's like, you know what? I really am starting to dislike all these people, realizing there's no real reason. I just like Claire that much. So I was like, that was our goal, to make people a little disillusioned with Claire.
Yeah. Even the first time it shows the husband, he kind of walks into a room and starts talking, and I hated him instantly. But I only saw 5 seconds of this guy's life. I mean, there's no real reason to hate him. I just did. I hated that 5 seconds of him. Yeah, and that moment that you mentioned before about boundaries, man, I've been there.
Yeah.
As someone who deals with anxiety and dependency issues, it immediately made me think of moments in my life where I always call it leaning on people, where I'm like, trying so hard to connect and so hard to be like, hey, validate my existence, because and you can't say it, but in my head, there's some really, suicidal or, negative things going on in my head. Validate me. And sometimes that kind of push, you think it's you trying to connect, but what it really is, and you're getting way too close to me right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you're violating all kinds of boundaries. And I think we have to understand there's nothing wrong with her wanting boundaries. That's perfectly natural.
Yeah.
It that was one of those stop the movie for a minute scenes, and kind of David. uh, and kind of going off of that, the world is not out to get her. Yes, there are people who have shades of opinions of her just because she walks into their life. It's kind of creepy because of the anxiety stuff. And, people are entitled to kind of respond how they respond. But it's not like people are out to get her or ruin her life. There's even, Olivia is, Bree Grant is sympathetic. I mean, you can see where she's picking up, oh, there's something up here that I didn't know, and I don't really know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
But is it now my role to deal with it? Because I don't think it is. And so, especially from Bree Grant's perspective, can you talk a bit about how her character came about to where you didn't make her obviously, like I said, there's points where you're like, come on, Olivia, please just rescue this girl. But it's not so black and white like that. Can you talk a little bit about that process with her character, since she's the other lead in the film?
Yeah, I think I never wanted the idea with her not being like a savior. To me, I guess boils down to like the simple idea. I feel like now I'm gonna get into all theory stuff, but that like a person, like no one can save another person if we're talking just about in general, and getting help with something, and also having that, like you're saying, what I call like the victim mentality, like everything is happening to me, the world is out to get me, feel sorry for me. That is not a truth, and plenty of people do get stuck in that dark like spiral, and it just leads to more destructive feelings and things. And I guess ultimately this is like a tragedy about someone who doesn't realize that they have to save themselves. And so with her, I just wanted her to be a kind person, but that also, didn't feel like this isn't my responsibility to save this person. It is healthy to have boundaries and to be able to say them to people. And just wanted her to be like a very independent, strong woman who was kind of a role model for her, but wasn't going to take this thing on. And then through the lens of the film, like I said, so much, it was all from Claire's perspective. So we present her in this way, like Claire sees her as perfect. Of course, no one sees themselves as perfect. And when I talked to Bria about her character, I was like, I had a lot of backstory, but I was like, we won't learn a lot about this about her, but it's important for you and I to know it. It was interesting because she's kind of like, she's created as like the anti-Claire. So to me, she was never nearly as developed as Claire. When I talked to Brie about it, she was still like, this is more development than any director's ever given me, or backstory on any character. But I felt like real insecure about it, because like Claire has like years of backstory I've worked on. But Olivia's always been designed as the anti-Claire. Claire sees her as they both came from this similar background. They had the same thing happen to them as a kid, and it's like, so why did Claire end up here, but Olivia ended up in this perfect place? So they're kind of like doppelgangers and opposites. And so much of Olivia's character was about this anti-Claire and all this theory versus why doesn't she actually help Claire? Sorry, I just went on a rant there.
No, the people who know me and like who personally know me are listening to you right now going, are we sure this movie isn't about David? Because which everyone knows I can't cut hair. But yeah, it's the idea of looking towards other people as the superhero who, oh, you face challenges and look how your life is perfect and you've overcome, and I'm so pathetic and I haven't been able to overcome this, and looking to those people and almost trying to force them to rescue you and be your savior. It's not their responsibility. You're not going to, I can say this from personal experience. You're not going to feel any better until you go and get help for yourself and learn how to love yourself. It's no one's responsibility, and no one can do it anyway. So that's my rant about the film. And like I said, it really, really connected with me. And I also want to say, for the people out there who are like, look, is there killing in this movie? Is this a horror movie? Oh yeah. There's also that. So yeah, it's really an amazing film that it's one of those films that hit me on a couple of levels to where I could watch it and feel the adrenaline of the moment of, the killing scenes and that sort of thing, and some of the suspenseful scenes. You could definitely feel that. But then after the fact, the next day, you're examining your own life and going, okay, clearly I'm not going to scalp anyone, but why am I feeling the way I'm feeling right now about this character? And so you've accomplished a lot with this film. I don't know how you did it.
Well, thank you very much. We spent a lot of time writing it and developing the production.
So when it's not available when we're recording this, but it will be by the time or it's going to be about to be released when we put this out. Tell everyone where they can find it. Is there a release planned? I'm certainly going to buy it so I can watch it again.
Yes, we are so excited. I can't believe it's so soon. We will be releasing on Arrow Player on March 1st, which is Arrow Video's streaming channel. We'll be there exclusively for a few months, and then in June, we will be released on VOD and Blu-ray, which, if you all know, Arrow's Blu-rays are like freaking incredible. Like everything they put out is collectible, and so I'm so excited. We've been working with a really exciting artist on all the cover, and it's been a dream come true working with Arrow. So I can't wait for people to see it. And we actually have a few random virtual festivals over the next month or two, and hoping for a small theatrical this summer, depending, of course, on
if there are theaters.
World. Yes. If there's theaters, if COVID is horrible, so many things.
I love the film. It's one of those films that really hits me hard and is going to stick with me for a long time. Everyone should watch the short right now, because that's available. And that's going to give you a little bit of a prelude into the film. And you're going to go, oh, there's more to this. And trust me, there's more to it. So thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. The Stylist will be available online on March 1st, 2021. Make sure you watch this movie. I really, really enjoyed it. Now, to give us a little more depth into social anxiety, what it is, what are the treatments, I'm very happy to have as my next guest, Dr. Christine Purdon. She's a professor of psychology at the University of Waterloo in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, director of clinical training in the PhD program at the University of Waterloo, and the co-author of Overcoming Obsessive Thoughts. Welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
You may not know this, but it is Women in Horror Month. February is. And so The Stylist, the movie that we're focusing on, that was written and directed by a woman. And I thought, if I get a guy to mansplain these subjects, people are going to kill me. So thank you. More than you possibly could know for being here. So first of all, if you don't mind, do you mind talking a bit about your book? It's Overcoming Obsessive Thoughts. It's not now. It's a part of OCD, but it's not your. I have to make sure the house is constantly clean or anything like that. Your focus on that book is more to do with other thoughts, like violent or that sort of thing. Can you get into a little bit about what people would learn in your book?
Yeah, no, that's, yeah. So you're absolutely right. A lot of people immediately think of OCD as being like contamination fears and cleaning, or else checking things lots and lots. And in fact, and those are absolutely part of OCD. But the book that I wrote with David A. Clark is addresses a type of OCD that we think of as like being characterized by repugnant obsessions. So these are thoughts, images, or impulses of doing or saying something you would never really want to do or say. So harming somebody, saying something blasphemous or doing something blasphemous, and in thoughts of sexual acts that are repugnant to you. And so these kinds of thoughts, we don't necessarily realize are part of OCD. And they are associated with a lot of mental compulsions. So that's something else people who don't really know about OCD is that people can be doing compulsions in their head. So, for example, people might be doing like a really excessive prayer cycle to try to neutralize a blasphemous thought. Or they may try to think a good image in response to having just had a flash of one of their obsessional negative images. So the book talks about how to think about why this is persisting and what people can do about it.
And I have to do this all the time, but I'm never going to get sick of doing it. Obviously, when we talk about movies, we're talking about fictional events that are intentionally to the extreme. The vast majority of people who have any sort of thoughts like this are not going to act out on them and do anything like that. How does, like, what is the, can the average person, do they get help from someone like you to kind of help turn those thoughts off, or is there a treatment method for that? Or
yeah, no, so it's so true that, like, I think I'm glad that you brought up that point, that people who have these thoughts are horrified by them and they do not act on them. There's no known instance of somebody acting on an obsessional thought. If somebody acts on a violent impulse, it's because of something else going on. So what we do with the thoughts is, first of all, we help people recognize that thoughts aren't facts. And so one of the reasons that these thoughts capture mental interest and capture attention is that they're so horrific and so out of character. And so people then start thinking, why would a person like me have a thought like this? And what's interesting is that most people have thoughts like this from time to time. So this was actually some research we did a long, long time ago, where we found that a lot of people, well, almost the entire sample of people that we looked at, have thoughts of like driving into the next lane, swerving into the next lane while driving, or a flash of a thought of doing something really sexually inappropriate, or yelling bomb at the airport, or something with lots of consequences that they'd never do. But the big difference between people who have those thoughts and then just go on about their lives, and the people who start to get problems with them, is that the people who develop problems start to think, yeah, like, why would a person like me have a thought like this? Maybe I'm a homicidal maniac at heart, or maybe I'm a pedophile and I just didn't realize it before. And they start to get very, very, very worried about what the thought means and what it means about the personality. And whereas other people are able to say, gee, even a person like me can have a thought like that, people who are prone to developing a problem with obsessional thoughts like this are more likely to think, gosh, this thought means I am this kind of person. So it sort of changes the self-view from being a benign person to being a dangerous person. And so then the thoughts then get a lot more attentional priority because it seems to have a really deep personal meaning. And then the person starts doing compulsions, so like thinking a positive thought in response to the negative thought. But then they also start doing a lot of avoidance. So they might avoid going near a playground. If they're having thoughts about that involve children, they might avoid going to a playground. They might avoid touching their own children. They might avoid changing a diaper. They may avoid going to church. And the problem with that is that they don't have a chance to learn anything new about what the thought actually means. And it undermines their capacity to trust themselves. So they don't develop the sense that, this is just a thought. It doesn't mean I'm going to do it. So what we try to do to help people is, first of all, just help them tolerate the thought. That doesn't mean like it or condone it. but just to tolerate it and treat it as a thought that goes through one's head as any other kind of thought, and then start to step back from how they've been evaluating the meaning and start to recognize that their idea about what this thought means is not a fact either, and that we can think about these thoughts in different ways. And then what we also want to do is help the person live with uncertainty. So what happens is that somebody will kind of know they're not a pedophile, for example, or they kind of know this isn't blasphemous, but it could be, like, they can't rule it out completely. So they feel the need to address the thought and to do this avoidance. And so what we do is help them learn to tolerate uncertainty, and to recognize that they're still allowed to get on with their lives despite not knowing for sure whether or not they're a pedophile or a sex offender, or whether or not they're out of grace with God. We help them just move on with their lives despite that bit of uncertainty. And eventually what happens is that their reactivity to the thought starts to go away. Their need to do something in response to the thought goes away. And eventually the thought itself starts to kind of recede.
Yeah. And really, we've all been driving and thought, I'm going to hit that guy that, that cut me off. I'm going to slam my car into him. And then you just, you get over it. It sounds a little bit like, which, we're going into, I'm sure it's different, but I have a generalized anxiety disorder, and the character that's in The Stylist has social anxiety issues. It sounds like there's a little bit of overlap there, and you kind of think about it and ruminate on it and just dwell on it. Is there like a crossover between people with anxiety and then people that have like an obsession issue?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because most people with obsessive compulsive disorder probably have another diagnosis as well. And often it's either social anxiety or depression. And GAD and social anxiety, or generalized anxiety disorder, and OCD can often go together as well. So there does seem to be potentially some common root to how the anxiety sort of manifests itself, for sure.
Going on anxiety, how do you navigate? And I, of course, know that I poorly navigated the world. But just in general, if someone is, because everyone says, and I don't mean to discount anyone's experience, but everyone has anxiety about something or other. And then there's that step where you have someone like me who I couldn't leave the house for a year because I thought that if someone saw me checking the mail, it would ruin their world and it would be the most terrible thing that could possibly happen to them. So, for someone with that serious form of anxiety, how do you navigate the world? There's a scene in The Stylist that takes place when they're going to get in their cars, where, and I'm not going to spoil it for anyone, but it hit me really hard because the main character was trying desperately to connect with a human being, hey, be my friend. And the more she was trying to do it, you could see the other character kind of like getting creeped out and saying, you're not doing it the normal way that humans interact. And frankly, I saw myself in a lot of that. Sorry for those of you who I did that to. So I guess to get into a little bit about the trap that people fall into, and how do they live their lives and break out of that cycle?
Yeah, no, such a good question. And I mean, you're absolutely right. Everybody has anxiety, and it's actually a good thing that we have that, because it motivates us, and it allows us in extreme situations, like where our physical well-being is in danger. It optimizes our capacity to flee or fight danger. And again, when we live in Canada, at least where I am, the chance of physical predation is actually pretty low, but there's a lot of other types of threat, like social threat or missing a deadline threat, and therefore career goal threat. And so that burst of anxiety can get you really focused and get you to accomplish your goals. However, there are a subset of people where that anxiety response is being triggered. What we might, I don't want to use the word inappropriately, but in the absence of an objective threat. And it's more where the mind is saying there's a threat, but if we step back from it and evaluate it, we can see ways that that process has been hijacked by the anxiety to produce a sense of threat when actually there really may not be one there. So those are the people with social anxiety, generalized anxiety, OCD, et cetera. And yeah, so the trap of anxiety is that people feel anxious.
Hold on, let me see if I remember it.
Sorry.
Trigger, response, avoidance pattern?
Exactly. Yes. Well done.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So we don't like being anxious. And that's an adaptive response. Like, we need to remember that the anxiety response evolved to protect us as a species, or allowed us to evolve as a species. So the anxiety response errs on the side of false positives. So it's more likely to cause an anxiety, like to trigger anxiety when there's nothing there, rather than the err on the side of not triggering anxiety when there is something there. But it's also meant to focus our attention on threat. And so that when we're anxious, we become very focused, like it actually affects our mind. And a lot of people don't recognize this as part of the anxiety arousal, which is that once it's triggered, it focuses our mind on threat at the expense of equally relevant but unrelated to threat information. So, for example, somebody with social anxiety might be under great duress, giving a talk, and there'll be 50 people in the audience. One of those people is on their phone or looks bored. That person with social anxiety will instantly pick up on that person, and it'll come at the expense of seeing all the other engaged, happy faces. So then it becomes, okay, look, I'm failing at this speech. And then there's a lot of self-monitoring of what's happening, which we don't have great attentional bandwidth and great working memory. So when we're trying to monitor our own performance while we're performing, and judge ourselves and catastrophize about the consequences of not getting it together and get on with it, it actually limits our capacity to do our job properly. So one thing that happens is that for, like you were talking about, the awkwardness in social situations. So people with social anxiety are multitasking at the speed of light. So first of all, they may have really, really strong, like exaggerated ideas about what other people expect from them. So they may go into a social situation thinking that they need to talk like one of the most intelligent people on earth, and they need to be witty and funny like the best comedians. And they also may think that unless they can do that, they only get one shot at this first impression. And if they blow it, no one will ever kind of view them favorably. So they go in loaded with an enormous amount of pressure. And then they're monitoring the other person so closely to see, like, am I doing okay with them or not? And that, I think, is what can create that sense of awkwardness, that because they're not able to just be themselves and be spontaneous and natural. And people pick up on that kind of quickly and start to think, what is going on with this person? and can start to withdraw, which then confirms the person's ideas about themselves. So I think that that's a real trap. And then then it makes it harder to go into the social situation the next time. But the other point I was going to make about anxiety is that it's very aversive. So when we feel a sense of anxiety, we're highly motivated to escape whatever situation it is, because way back as we were evolving as a species, we don't have big teeth, we don't have claws, our skin is soft, we're really not, we're just easy prey. So the way we survive is with a really, really functional alarm system that helps us flee and fight and anticipate flee and fight threat. So when we feel anxiety, we automatically assume there's something to be anxious about, and we do get this big escape or flight kind of mechanism. So we're very motivated to do whatever it takes to reduce that anxious response. And so often, like, we'll flee the situation, or if we can't flee it, we'll avoid the anxiety evoking aspects of the situation. So somebody with social anxiety at a party may avoid chatting with kind of the popular people, or the people that they think are more intelligent than they are. And instead, what they might do is go help the hostess pass out hors d'oeuvres. So then they're not on the hook for any kind of conversations, and they still look helpful. Or they may drink a lot, because then, like, drinking calms it down a bit, but also if they do something foolish, it'll be attributed to the alcohol and not to them being silly or weak or foolish or something. So even if people go through the situation, they come away thinking, oh my gosh, that was awful, and I needed to do all those things to get through it. If they leave the situation, they feel better. So what we learn is when I'm in the situation, I feel bad. When I'm out of the situation, I feel better. So if fight and flight responses are sort of rewarded.
Well, first of all, I wasn't aware I was going to be so personally attacked in this conversation.
Do you feel seen?
Woo-wee. Man. Welcome to my life. She just explained it better than I did. And I think that the weird thing with me was I never realized that wasn't life until it was pointed out to me by a professional, and I got on medication and went through the behavioral activation therapy and stuff like that, to where I realized, oh, you mean everyone doesn't think this way? This actually isn't life, and because it really is. I always said that I was like the world's biggest conspiracy theorist, and I was the conspiracy. So I was constantly going, hey, I said hi to that person, and they looked the other way after saying hi. Why would they do that? They must hate me. I bet they're talking about me right now. And then 4 hours later, I'm like, I should have told a funny joke or something. And it's like, David, get over yourself. So for the people who know that there's someone in their life that's going through this, and like I said, I didn't know I was going through something. I just thought I was worthless. What can the person who knows them do to kind of direct them? Is there an appropriate action? Because I know a lot of people that I knew that kind of maybe, didn't know how to act, so they kind of parted ways with me. They've said since, I just didn't know what to do. I knew something was wrong, but what am I supposed to do? Is there a way to not walk on eggshells, but kind of direct someone in the right direction?
Yeah. So I think one thing about anxiety, because people are in distress when they're anxious. And so if they reveal that distress, and people with social anxiety are highly motivated to try to conceal those anxiety responses, because people with social anxiety often are of the opinion that if other people see them looking anxious, they'll think the other person will think they're weak and not worthy. And so there's a lot of effort can be put into trying to mask symptoms of social anxiety. So people will wear a turtleneck, for example, to disguise blushing and such, even when it's like quite warm out. But the other thing that the people around somebody with anxiety, our instinct is to soothe, is to try to calm down the anxiety and to accommodate the anxiety, to do what the person wants. And the problem is it puts the anxiety in the driver's seat. And so although it's an empathic response, the anxiety is insatiable. So the more you accommodate, the more it wants. There's no bottom to this. So people will, they'll follow all kinds of rules. People with family members of OCD follow tons of rules that the person with OCD sets up in order to try to reduce their anxiety. Family members of people with social anxiety will follow rules like make sure that they never leave the side of the person, or that they seat the person in the corner and bring them the food and the drink, and then bring them someone friendly to talk to, and then take that person away, just like really accommodate the symptoms. And it makes sense why people do that. But the problem is that there's no new learning available about the true nature of the person's anxiety. And the number and range of situations that need to be accommodated tends to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's where, initially friends might be super supportive, but over time they're like, I can't do this. It's too complex to be out with this person because there's too many rules or things I need to do or too many insecurities. And so I think, friends aren't going to be able to do very much to help the person overcome social anxiety. But what friends can do is try to work against the anxieties, try to driven need to kind of protect and keep the person from being out there. So I think friends can, take the person to a party and say, just, come with us and stay for, 2 hours and talk to these people. And just kind of check in on them, but try to have them in the situation and try to have them try to point out information that's not consistent with what the anxiety is telling them. Again, friends are not going to be able to do much to overcome it. It really, that kind of anxiety that we're talking about typically doesn't remit on its own. And if the person could overcome it or if friends could help them overcome it, it would have happened by now. So I think professional help is really important, and evidence-based professional help, so cognitive behavior therapy, for example, not supportive counseling, that's not going to do much to challenge the anxiety.
Right. Thank you, because the end result is don't rely on the people to be experts in the field. You got to go to someone who actually has a degree and knows how to work this. Because it's just like you mentioned, it's a black hole. I mean, if someone were to walk up to me at a few years ago and say, "Oh, David, you're one of my favorite people," then I'd go, "What do you mean one of?" And I'd be thinking, well, how many people are ahead of me?
Yeah.
And why did they say that to me? That must mean that I'm really not one of their favorite people. There's no way to overcome that. So you have to get into, I guess there's other methods, but cognitive behavioral therapy, I think, did wonders for me. And that's basically kind of rewiring your brain, starting. I know we're not going to go through the whole thing, but I started with the daily planner of putting my feelings down every hour and what I did and all that kind of stuff. And through the process, you just kind of not to give the whole program away, but you basically rewire people's brains.
Well, so I think what you're doing, and the way I see the goal and purpose of cognitive behavior therapy is to override the automatic processes that are driving the emotion or behavior of complaint. So with an anxiety response, when the anxiety gets triggered, there are the physiological changes in the body that prepare the body to flee or fight danger. And then there's the emotion, which could be fear, anger, which I'll talk about in a minute, but panic, terror, etc., or even just a low-grade sense of dread or threat or doom, or the shoe is going to drop. I just know it. I just don't know what it's going to be. But also, more importantly, is that this shift in attentional priority. So it's important to recognize the way our attentional system works is that at any given moment, we could be having 100 different thoughts. So we could be thinking about, what are we going to put on for dinner? Where is my cat? Is it going to barge in and ruin this podcast? Or we could be focusing on the exact matter at hand. And our ability to function adaptively relies on an attentional system that can prioritize information most relevant to our immediate goals. And what happens with anxiety is that threat-relevant information is given attentional priority. It's triggered. It gets immediate attentional capture. So we notice threat cues very, very quickly, and then we stick on them, or we try to avoid them, but that requires a whole bunch of attentional effort as well. The other thing that's kind of interesting to think about with anxiety is that it's the amygdala, which is an area of the brain that people refer to as the emotion center, but it's nestled right against the hippocampus, which is our memory bank. And what they think is going on is that when the amygdala is activated with anxiety, it knocks on the door of the hippocampus and says, I need to respond to this situational threat really fast. Can you give me a relevant memory that helps me know what to do? And so what happens is then you get memories of similar situations. So let's say when you were in grade 6, you were humiliated by a teacher in front of the class and they all laughed. You may carry that with you in ways that you may not realize. So now if you're in a meeting and it's a similar type of situation where you've got somebody in the meeting who's like that really super mean, unprofessional teacher, it may activate immediately that memory. And your response might be, this is dangerous. Don't even say anything at the meeting. So you may be responding to old autobiographical things that have come up very quickly because, again, anxiety is meant to help you act very, very quickly in the face of threat or perceived threat. So we can have a lot of processing that's happening outside of our awareness that that's really what's going on. And in cognitive behavior therapy, what we do is help people take that mental step backward and look at the conclusions that the anxiety is presenting to the person on a silver platter as if they're facts. So, for example, in this meeting situation, the rapid conclusion is, don't say anything or you're going to be mocked or humiliated. And so then you don't say anything, but then that has consequences. And you sit the whole meeting worrying about being called on. But it's presented this idea as a fact in your brain, and it hasn't given you the opportunity to step back and evaluate, well, wait a minute, is that really a fact? Do I know for sure that's happening? And it doesn't give you a chance to get new learning about the meaning and importance of even that memory. I mean, that memory means that the teacher was very unprofessional and cruel, not that you're an idiot. But you don't have a chance to update that meaning. So cognitive behavior therapy is meant to help override those automatic processes and engage the upper areas of the brain, the frontal lobes of the brain, to actually take a mental step backward, look at the information that is that you feel supports the anxiety idea, but also zoom out and look at the information that doesn't support the anxiety idea. And then you have an opportunity to see what is the idea that best fits all of the information, not just the information that the anxiety makes available to you through that attentional prioritizing.
And honestly, I don't know. I mean, I guess everyone does have bits of this, but it's amazing how when I started going through cognitive behavioral therapy, where I would notice something happened to me decades ago, and it affects the way I act on a daily basis today.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's such a shame because there's so many people like myself that are walking around not living up to their full potential because they're constantly reacting to a non-existent threat based off of a memory from, like you said, 6th grade or what have you. Yeah. And that's, it sucks. And that's why I really am glad that you were willing to come and explain it to people in a way that I can't, because look, nobody's giving me a degree. Okay. That ain't happening. It really means a lot to me, to kind of put this into words, because it's so difficult to understand. Wait, everyone feels anxiety. Yours is different from mine? Yes, it sometimes can be. So I really, really appreciate it. And everyone should, if you're having that issue, go get cognitive behavioral therapy. It's amazing. It'll and that's what you specialize in, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. See, I don't pick scrubs here. Okay. I pick people who know what they're doing, and you are in Canada, which you guys are a wonderful country up there. When COVID's over, I'm planning to visit, but I think that I'm sure you do amazing work up there. Thank you so much for educating me and everyone else, even though you had to show people a little bit of a side of me I didn't want to tell. But thank you very, very much.
Oh, my pleasure. It really is.
And that is our show. I'd like to thank my guests. Jill Gervargizian, The Stylist, will be available everywhere March 1st. Watch that movie. It's amazing. And psychologist Christine Purdon. And of course, thank all of you for listening. And thanks for bearing with us while we go through a lot of changes here. We're a new nonprofit. When this podcast started, we were not a nonprofit, and now we are. And so much is changing for us. And thank you for being patient while we grow. You can reach out to us at info@gwecontact.org or on social media at GWE Contact on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll talk with you again soon. And remember, like any great franchise, your story isn't over yet.